This alien book series is about as crazy as Shane in season 2 of The Walking Dead. Hello, welcome back to a very rare second channel video that is not a live stream. I've been talking about doing these book videos for so long that I feel like I'm gonna forget all the books because I keep going through a lot of books and I already don't remember most of them. So I wanted to start finally talking about this stuff. The first one, in the big 2025, we keep hearing about interstellar things, we keep hearing about aliens, and man do I hope we get aliens, but we never do because it would be too much fun. So instead I read a book about it. The Three-Body Problem. It's getting a TV show, the TV show's taking too long, so I read the source material like a true nerd. Book 1, most of it is adapted, but as it turns out, season 1 also adapted a ton of book 3, which is very weird because it's very different. We'll talk about this. So, the first thing I want to talk about the series, before we talk about any of the plot, anything, which by the way, big spoilers ahead, just FYI. My favorite thing about this book series is the way it switches between these sort of very individual narratives and these sort of flashpoints where we actually delve into pretty much everything the characters are feeling, everything they're going through. A lot of this book series is about coping with existential horror, existential dread, a lot of these things, right? We pretty much have a character who encompasses different aspects of this in every single book, right? That's sort of the perspective character we share. In book 1, it's about sending a message to the aliens in the first place. Book 2 is the whole thing about imagining the woman, and then it's kind of landing on that. We'll talk about this. So, we do get these very in-depth character narratives. But the rest of the book, and sort of the book at large, it feels weirdly like detached and almost as if I'm just looking in from the outside, right? It's almost like even though we get these personal stories and we get sort of their inner monologues, it feels like the book is more so written from a narrator's point of view, almost like a history book, right? Again, in a history book, there are flashpoints where you get sort of these dialogues back and forth. But really, it's kind of like this terrible thing happened, next thing. And there is no lingering on this. And this is what this book does so much, and I loved it. Because it's kind of like, there's an alien invasion coming, right? We gotta start prepping. Then we actually figure out kind of, wait, we can work with this, kind of like, we start figuring things out. Actually, no, humanity still dies. Humanity is all trapped in Australia. And then it just keeps escalating until it's suddenly like a millions of years time skip. And I was like, that's crazy. Like, we're just going through all of this. And this is kind of like a brief history of humanity type of deal, right? It goes through so much that it felt almost existential in nature, right? I don't have the vocabulary to describe it, but it's very interesting how that perspective is written. Love it. So, that being said, I want to talk about the books, which unfortunately, not just the Netflix series, I already knew about a lot of the things that would happen. I've also seen way too many videos about aliens and space and stuff. So I know about the whole Dark Forest hypothesis before I even read the books. So there is that. But book 1. So book 1 is the one where most of it is adapted. What I really like about the first book is that it sort of starts with something that is very simple, and the alien invasion isn't just a thing that sort of happens, right? Even though, I mean, you could argue that it still kind of just happens because, like, you just send out a signal. That's not how it really works. But anyway, the reason the aliens actually hear about Earth is because of people. The entire book starts about there's like a whole ideological and political clash about reactionary science and all of this, and pretty much what happens is that enough people get disillusioned with the regime, and then they start basically going against the regime, and in their case, it's about beaming a message out into space and yearning for a savior, right? Again, it's one of the ways the book explores sort of this existential dread and coping with something that is incomprehensible in many ways, right? Like, they were never going to really topple the regime, you know? So what they do instead is just send out this message hoping that something somehow saves them. I really enjoyed that because it felt like a natural prelude into everything that would come next, because despite a lot of this book being about aliens, a vast majority of it is actually about how humanity deals with the existential knowledge of there being aliens or aliens invading or whatever else. Right, like the aliens are not really a focus in this alien story, which is a whole different thing. We'll talk about this. One thing that I also loved and also found a little bit weird is the titular three-body video game. What I loved about it is, and maybe this is just like my weird brain, I was reading how they were doing like the circuitry, and obviously I saw this in the show as well. The whole circuitry idea of replicating a computer with just people is the coolest thing I've seen in my life, and it just made my brain race with possibilities about like a different species that could like they evolve very, very slightly differently, so they end up with ridiculous technology, but they don't have like this technology that we have, right? So in some ways they're infinitely more advanced, but in others they're not. And this is where you get into like the whole, is science like convergent or divergent, and there's so much stuff you could think about that. And I was just like, they were talking about how they lined up people and they flipped the bits, and I was like, oh my god, this is the coolest thing ever. A human computer. And obviously because like my mind was already racing, I was like, what if someone went like 1,000 years into the past and made a computer with people? I was thinking about all these things. So that was really, really cool. The only thing that I found weird is the VR game itself, because at the very start I was like, how much of this is like even Trisolaran stuff? How much of it is Earth stuff? How did this like whole cult even happen? I was confused about a lot of the things around the video game. And honestly, even now that I've finished the series, I'm still kind of confused how the hell any of it works. I don't think I was supposed to understand how it works, but I was very, very confused about the whole VR thing. Felt weird. It was alright though, it was pretty interesting. So obviously, most of the first book is about the prelude to learning about the aliens, and then it's kind of like, there are a few like individual narratives in the first book as well, but I'll just scoot past them. The coolest character is the detective dude, obviously, and like the whole thing about all the scientists sort of committing the Sudoku because science is collapsing and all that. That was also really interesting from a mystery point of view and sort of why all this is happening. That was all cool. But yes, the first book pretty much ends with the Trisolarans have blocked science with some kind of weird, the Sophon things, they like stop scientific progress or whatever. It's nonsense. I don't think it works that way. I asked ChatGPT because I was like, is any of this even based in science? Apparently not really. I don't know. But yes, and then we learn that aliens are coming, and then that's where it kind of ends. First book, pretty alright. Again, I'd seen the show, so I think a lot of it sort of wasn't really that surprising to me. So the first one was kind of just like, it's alright, it's alright. Where it gets absolutely legendary, though, is book 2. Book 2, the Teacherul Dark Forest, right? The Wallfacer project is like the coolest thing anyone's ever come up with. I like the idea so much. So if you haven't read the books, if you don't know anything, if you've read the books, you just don't remember, if you don't know anything about this. So basically what the Wallfacer project is the aliens are capable of pretty much learning any bit of information that humanity shares, right? So in order to combat this, there is they create like this thing where there is a guy and there's another guy. One of the guys is supposed to come up with a strategy to defeat the aliens, while the other guy is meant to constantly try and figure out what this guy is thinking, right? So the Wall Facer and the Wall Breaker. And I think there were 4 pairs, right? So 4 dudes coming up with strategies and 4 dudes trying to figure out what their strategies are. The moment they figure out the strategy, the Wall Facer has failed, right? Because if the person could figure it out, the Trisolarans could as well. And a lot of the book sort of deals with very, very different ways of how you could solve this, which again brings in the existential angle, right? When you have something that is so far beyond our comprehension, and you effectively create the system where you give 4 people the power of the world to just work the problem, it brings in like very, very extreme means. What were the 4 things? I had them written down. I think one was based in deception, so I think the idea was, spoilers, all of them fail, so I don't really remember them that well. One of them I think was based in deception, where it was an idea of sort of making the world, basically to make us seem like we're not technologically advanced and that like we are not a threat. Something along those lines. It was something based in deception and like propaganda. So that was one. It failed. The other was mutually assured destruction, because the Trisolarans, clues in the name, they have like the 3 suns, the 3 body problem, right? So they can't live a stable thing, so they want Earth, right? So the idea is mutually assured destruction. If the Trisolarans are going to attack us, we're just going to destroy the Earth, right? So I think there was like a thing of nuking the entire planet into oblivion, and then the Trisolarans sort of lose their safe haven. So that was one thing. That also failed. And there was another idea, I think it was about some kind of neuroscience reprogramming our brains or something like that. And that also failed, right? And the final person, which is the primary point of view character, is the one who goes through this whole weird disillusionment where he starts off as kind of like a narcissistic sort of, he brushes everything off, he doesn't really care about anything. And then a lot of the book, and this is where I was very, very lost, because the book started this whole thing about how he imagines this fantasy woman, right? And this part is so long. I checked the internet. A lot of people were bored by this part, and I was bored by it as well. And because I was bored by it, I was desperately trying to figure out what the hell's going on. So there is paragraphs and paragraphs and paragraphs of him imagining a woman. And he imagines her by the fireplace. This is like a thing that's focused on, and all of this. And I was like, what is going on? Why is this a thing? So, two conclusions. Number one, I think it's again the existential angle. They knew they were all dead, right? Like, again, just like book one and the whole thing of we can't topple the regime, so we send out a message into space, hopefully someone's gonna save us. With this guy, it was pretty much we're all gonna die, so I'm pretty much just gonna live out my days in a weird fantasy, right? With this like fantasy imaginary woman. So that made sense, right? It was kind of like escapism, which I guess in the same way that the three body problem itself, the VR game, is kind of escapist in nature as well. But that was that about, right? So instead of being a wall facer, he's just gonna live a fantasy, right? He doesn't really do anything with the power that is given to him. He's kind of just relaxing. The only thing he did is he started getting people to sketch her and try and track her down, right? Which brings us onto numero 2. So this is kind of where I was spoiled, right? Because the whole reveal of the book is that he cast a spell and then the Trisolaris is like blasted, right? And what that actually is his realization about the Dark Forest. Basically that the entire cosmos is actually full of life, but that everyone hides in a dark forest because there is always a predator that will just like hunt down whatever could potentially be a threat, right? That's the whole realization. But what I think that sort of links in with the woman is because he's trying to track her down from just like a pure fantasy, he eventually finds someone just like that, right? And I think the whole woman subplot, next to just being like this escapist cope, I guess, is about realizing the idea that sort of information and location and everything about you is potentially the biggest power that you could ever have, right? And I don't know if this is just like me drawing conclusions where there are none, but that sort of makes sense to me. And then of course we come to the Dark Forest deterrence, where Luoji, I think his name was, pretty sure that was his name. That's the only one I remember because he was crazy. So they create the system where we're going to beam out to Trisolaris that we know your location, and if we, well actually, I guess he kind of did in the first place, right? So never mind. There was like a whole thing about we're going to beam out your location and then everyone else in the cosmos is going to strike you. And then I don't remember if that's in the second book or the third book, where the idea of these Dark Forest strikes are introduced, right? So basically the idea that even if the alien species doesn't want to invade you or attack you, it is just economically more beneficial to throw out a Dark Forest strike if you know someone's there, right? It's just like the optimal solution. So the moment a location of an intelligent species is revealed, everyone just shoots off a random thing in that direction because it's cheap, right? And that's it. So pretty much we enter this very, very rocky piece where Trisolaris and humanity are sort of on equal footing, where they can sort of destroy each other through this Dark Forest deterrence, right? Which I guess is supposed to be kind of a weird also message on the Cold War and the deterrence we have in the real world, right? Because again, like a lot of the Wallfacer project plans were pretty much stuff we did in the real world as well, right? Like MAD and all that, we have that in the real world. So that was really, really cool. And Luoji's story about sort of pseudo dying at the end, I was very confused at one point. I thought he pretty much gave up on life and died, but it turns out that he didn't, right? Because he's back in the third book. But I thought bro actually just died. But the whole casting a spell thing, the way that is written, that was also really, really cool. So I really, really enjoyed the second book. magnitudes more than all the rest. The third book, though, the third book is interesting. The third book jumps way, way into the future, and technology is way more advanced. They are living through this sort of rocky peace, and everything seems to be all right. Like, yeah, there is kind of the idea that maybe at some point bad things might happen, but really not. And we switch perspective to Chong, I think it's Chong. And the whole, basically, TLDR is that she wants to maintain peace. We go from wall facers, right? Because wall facers are no more. It's just Luoji who is the sword holder now. And they have this whole thing where Luoji is gonna sort of retire, and then she's supposed to take over the Dark Forest deterrence. And because of like compassion and understanding and all of this, this is where season 1 adapted like some of the plot, where she had a friend who was dying of some kind, it was cancer or some kind of sickness, right? He was dying. So he bought her a star, and that's like a whole thing about human compassion, human understanding, and all this, right? Oh yeah, and there was also the stair project. That was like a whole different thing, whatever. So point is, because of compassion or understanding or whatever, Chong sort of fails, right? When they're supposed to do the ceremony of handing over the sword holder thing, she doesn't. And I immediately got to thinking, what is this? I think pretty much what this was exploring is the paradox of tolerance, right? So even though they had this shaky peace, people got complacent. And sort of all throughout the book, we see this weird thing where people are kind of ignorant of what's going on. People are kind of just vibing in this world and not really, they've kind of forgotten about everything that happened, which in a way makes sense, right? Like that part is behind us. Again, just like in the real world, there's been a lot of bad stuff that has happened, so we sort of just moved past all that, and now we're living pretty well, right? But still, there are these people who sort of need to look out for your safety, because there will always be someone at the Dark Forest who wants to come for you, right? And in this moment of compassion and hope for that maybe we don't need a sword holder, she falters and the world is going to be destroyed, right? The paradox of tolerance, in case you don't know, is pretty much the idea that if you tolerate intolerance for long enough, intolerance will take over, right? So it doesn't matter how good your ideas are, how good your intentions are, if you keep just letting people move the goalposts and not really like clamping down at some point, the sort of status quo will fade, right? In this case, it's kind of like it happens all at once. It's kind of like a flashpoint, but I still think it's largely the same idea. And I did really, really enjoy that, right? Where it's sort of like everyone's used to the good times, and that can be dangerous in its own right, right? And this is where things get like super, super, super weird. Her friend who was sent off as like a head or whatever into space, he comes back with fairy tales, and there's a bunch of things that are hidden in the fairy tales. Again, I think the fairy tales that were written out, super detailed, super long. I love the idea of humanity trying to decipher what's actually being said, because again, Lemino just made a video about this. If you want to see what we have sent into space and how hard it is to decipher even for normal people, what's hidden in these secret messages, it's a really, really interesting thought exercise, right? In his case, it is a fairy tale with hidden details, but even if it's not like a pseudo fairy tale with hidden details, even if it's just literal information, deciphering what the hell any of it means, if you're trying to like purposely hide stuff in something else, it's borderline impossible. And there's like a whole thing where they get a council together and they need to decipher what these fairy tales are, what he's trying to say, what is usable, what is not. That was really, really cool, purely from I would love to know what this would be like in the real world type of vibe, right? But I do think like similar to the woman fantasies, I think that was a bit long, right? It felt like a bit padded out in a way. But yeah, the third book is pretty much where everything gets mega depressing, and everything that was okay, it gets infinitely worse. So all of humanity is basically put in a cage, and they're like shipped off to Australia, and then people start dying, and then things get worse and worse and worse and worse, and pretty much everything everywhere always dies, right? And the book pretty much it escalates up until the point of like a pocket universe, and then they sort of reunite, and it's a whole, it just keeps getting worse and worse and worse until the heat death of the universe, pretty much. And it gets super, super existential. My takeaway from this whole thing is, in a way, very similar to Attack on Titan, right? Because I think at the end of the day, it's about existentialism and human morality, human nature, and sort of where does compassion, understanding, sacrifice, selflessness sort of end, and just a hunter in a dark forest begin, right? This one just takes it to a ridiculous level where, and I think that's another big part why the whole scientific angle keeps escalating and escalating and escalating. At first, our science is blocked and is just like a thing of we need to figure out what to do. Then we get all this science, but things still go wrong, and then we eventually, like, dimensions themselves are folding, right? And it's kind of like this thing where no matter how far you go, in the grand scheme of things, it's sort of like this existential insignificance, I guess. Nothing really matters, right? And we sort of have to draw our own lines where does humanity even end, or what does humanity mean in a world where all of this is happening? Are we hunters? Are we prey? Are we both? Or do we just not care and sort of live with the time we have, like Luoji did with his fantasies? I don't think there is like a core idea that you're supposed to take from the book, because by the end of the series, it does really feel like it's sort of blasting on all cylinders, and you're sort of looking past at how it all started and where it all ended, and you're sort of just thinking about what happens in between. Because in the end, the universe is dead, right? There is nothing that remains. I think naturally you have to ask the question of at what point could things have gone differently to have a better outcome, or maybe none of this was worth it at all. And all these questions, right? Like, should we have struck first, right? Like, should this deterrence even have been a thing? Should we have just struck first and ended it then and there, right? And all of those types of questions pop up. And it's really interesting how it's a whole series about aliens and alien threats, and sure, we feel their direct presence in some ways, but it's always about the people, and it's always about humanity as a whole, how they react. And that's, I think, my favorite part of the book, in terms of that it largely boils down humanity's reactions to an aggregate, right? So even though, like Chang Cheng, again, I forget her name, there's a whole thing where there are many people who hate her, but there are also many people who think that she is like this enlightened being. It does this a lot, right? And I really like this, how it really doesn't care about the, which is again why I liken it to a history book. It doesn't really feel like it cares about the minute details in certain ways, and it just does the aggregates, which again makes sense if we're dealing with existential stuff, right? There is no time to spend on small details, even though a lot of it is about small details. It blends super big picture ideas with these individual character narratives, and I love that. One last thing I didn't mention is talking about like this whole taking humanity as an aggregate, right? With the whole wall facer stuff and all that, there's also a really interesting sort of thing that emerges in terms of humanity as a whole coping with what is going on, right? So a lot of the time you might have heard of this thought experiment of, oh, humans are only fighting amongst each other until there's a greater foe, right? And if you look at parts of history, this seems to be kind of true, right? Like usually when there's one big bad guy, impossible people sometimes team up, right? Has been done before. But at the same time, if you really dig into the details of it, a lot of the time there's also an equal number of opportunist people, right? Who might team up just to take advantage of a situation, or maybe people who actually just exploit what is actually going on and sort of free ride, right? And we see different aspects of this within the book as well. So it really challenges the idea that humanity is a thing that can unite in the face of a greater foe. We see people who say we should just flee the planet, right? Intuitively makes sense. Like if we want to continue the human species, which ideally every single person should be on board with, we should just say, yeah, sure, fly off. That's not how things work though, because who gets to fly away and who gets to stay? And we suddenly deal with home turf politics, home turf like societal status and all this. And it's not about the aliens at all. And then as it turns out, it only gets messier, and then there's like the whole thing of where they start to flee, and it's like a goddamn massacre when they try and flee the planet, right? So that's like another thing that I really enjoyed, where it takes, I don't want to say it's a cynical perspective on humanity, because I think it's just realistic, where it doesn't really matter whether it's domestic or like the book started, right, where there is just like China and the West, or whatever, like reactionary science, and just base science or whatever, or it's an alien threat. Humanity is also a dark forest. Dark forest, dark forest, dark forest all the way throughout, you know, the Attack on Titan thing. I really, really enjoyed the book. This is one of those books where I guess I'm not really like I don't really care about the plot that much, if that makes sense. I really, really like the ideas that it explores, right? Where it's always a question of how far can human values go, and is all of it built on like a cope, effectively, right? Like, is everything we believe just one big cope that immediately breaks down as long as something as fast as soon as something goes wrong, right? Like whether it's a alien or whatever, right? Like do we instantly become just frightened hunters blasting everything, or will this morality prevail, and will that morality be the death of us? It goes back and forth, right? So I really, really enjoyed this. I'm excited to see the show, but in terms of the book, like, if you watch this video, I really haven't spoiled all that much. I would recommend reading the book. It is really, really interesting. A really, really interesting read. The audiobooks are also really, really good. The only thing is, be aware that the narrators change a few times, and that can be a bit weird to get used to. But it's all right. It's all right. I enjoyed the books. I think they explore really, really interesting ideas. The show, some of the changes they've made already are very, very weird from the books. What I really, really enjoy about the book is that it really swings between a singular perspective character and then full-blown existentialism, right? Whereas the TV show, they spread like the season one, like the main characters of book one, they spread them into like 6 or 7 people, and you lose, I think, that essence of following a singular narrative, right? At least it felt that way going from the book to the show, or I guess the other way around. But still, it was a fun read, it was a fun watch, and a big recommend. That's it. See you in the next book video. Bye-bye.